What is going on, comic book family? It's your boy, the Bearded Comic Bro, and I am welcoming back to the show Alex Segura. Welcome back, my friend.
I'm good. Thanks for having me, man. I had such a fun time the first time that I had to come back and bug you some more.
Listen, I had a blast because I reached out to you right after I read Secret Identity. If you're not familiar with Alex's work, tons of great novels and things like that. But I had not read any of your Pete Fernandez stuff, so Silent City or anything. And you were talking about, I'm like, oh, those sound like books I want. I went through the whole stack here, and I'm like, oh my goodness, they're so good.
Wow, thank you. It's so cool
And
to see them.
it it was man, I love this series, and so I say all of that because one of the big reasons I wanted to talk to you again was news broke a couple months ago that you were going to be a co-writer of one of my favorite franchises. We moved the podcast studio today to be in front of the Dick Tracy shelf
On
rather than
location
rather
from
than
the
the
city.
token bookshelf.
Yeah.
So, man, welcome back. Let's hop right into it. How did you
Yeah.
get connected with writing, getting to write Dick Tracy?
It's such a wild story, and I'm actually still kind of pinching myself that we're getting to the point where the book is actually coming out. I have to say, it's been like a long, long journey, in the way that sometimes comics take winding roads to get you where you want to go. But I remember I was at Long Beach Comic Con around 2015 talking to a friend of mine who was also a writer, and he was like, well, what's the one IP, not DC or Marvel, that you would kill to write? Not literally, obviously, but um Dick Tracy. I said Dick Tracy without hesitation. And so I walked back to my hotel room and I was like, well, who has the rights to Dick Tracy? And so I did some research. I dug up a contact at Tribune, and at the time I was at Archie. So I said, we might be interested in getting the comic license. And, things proceeded apace, and we thought we got the license, and I reached out to Michael, who was a friend of mine and had written some stuff at Archie for us. And I said, are you a Dick Tracy fan? Like, I get the feeling that you are a Dick Tracy fan, and I feel like you would do a great job writing this with me. And we went back and forth, and then we came upon, the root of what eventually is coming out now, not one for one. But long story short, there was an issue with the license, and so we didn't have the license after all. But the idea stuck in my mind, and it stuck in Michael's mind. And our friend Chantel, who's a creative consultant and was really helpful in eventually getting the license for us. We all kind of pooled our resources and reached out to Tribune and said, if the license ever lapses, or if the license is ever available, we'd love to have it, or we'd love to make a pitch for it. And so we did, and they were impressed with what we came up with, which was kind of the top line version of what people will see in a couple of weeks. And we were in the unique position of the creative having a license and then shopping it to a publisher, as opposed to traditionally the publisher has a license and they pick the creative team. So it was a cool moment, and we reached out to Mad Cave because we liked the books they put out. I know a lot of the people there, and it seemed like a good fit, especially with all the other pulp stuff that Mad Cave is going to be doing, like Flash Gordon and things like that. So they were into it, and here we are. And I think the next big win after that was getting Geraldo Borges on the book, who is just amazing. Just really one of these hidden gems of, they always joke freelancers, if you're two of three things, you're going to keep getting work, which is nice, good, and fast. If you're two of those three things, you're going to keep getting work. He's all three of those things. He's extremely nice, kind-hearted. He's supremely talented, and he's very fast, which in a way that he can juggle doing Thunderbolts and No One at Image and Dick Tracy all at once and make each page still look really good. So he has the right balance of the noir vibe, but his storytelling is just so, we almost don't even have to write words, because if you just look at his expressions and pacing and camera angles, it just sings. So
Oh yeah.
having Geraldo on the team, and then bringing in colorist Mark Englert, who's amazing, and who does this thing that I mention it every time I do an interview because it really blows my mind, and it's just a testament to how good he is. If you look at the comic, you realize it's balancing between the really pulpy gold stuff, the original newspaper strips, the source material, which is almost grotesque in how it showcases the villains, and it also straddles the movie, the color palette of the movie. You see it in subtle ways in the suits that people are wearing or the lighting. So yeah, we really lucked out. And Jim Campbell, I've worked with Jim so many times, and he's basically Michael's favorite letterer. So we had no hesitation saying we wanted to work with Jim. And he does one thing in that opening preview sequence, and I'll stop rambling, but if
Oh,
you look at
this
that
is fine.
yeah, that preview that we showed,
Yeah.
I don't want to give away the scene. You can look at it, but there's a sequence where there's like blood splattered on the wall that actually spells out the final caption, and he did it in such a cool way that it didn't feel kitschy or like a trick. It just felt like really cinematic, and it just feels like a good team. And Chantel, is really, she's got an eye to the brand and like what we can do to really like elevate the brand and make it feel like a new take on Dick Tracy, but one that also honors everything that's come before. But I think our big thing too is we want it to be appealing to people that maybe aren't like hardcore Dick Tracy people like you and I, like someone that's maybe just looking for a great crime comic. Like this will hopefully be that for you, and then introduce you to these amazing characters that I, for one, like are up there for me with like Batman and Spider-Man and Archie, like iconic characters. Such a killer rogues gallery too. Like
Oh,
I think it's fantastic.
one of the so you're saying this is not common to just have a shelf full of Dick Tracy memorabilia in your
I mean,
basement?
I'll take you into my office, but no, it is not. It's not like not a requirement. But yeah, it's it almost felt like when the movie was coming out, or there was that period long after the movie when there was no sequel. Like if you met another Dick Tracy fan, it was like code. It was like, oh, you get it, you get it. Now, hopefully the hope with the comic is that we're gonna bring in some more fans and create more awareness of the character, and that would be the dream.
How how was it for you and Michael then, and the rest of the team of, it sounds like you both had a love for the character of Dick Tracy. How was it trying to figure out how you wanted to take it in a direction that was kind of a new, because I've seen the ads from Matt Cave, not your dad's grandpa's, Dick
Yeah,
Tracy, and but it is still like
yeah.
there's elements of that Dick Tracy. So how did you balance giving what fans like myself and you as fans that balance, but also then trying to figure out how do we make it something fresh for new readers who aren't obsessed with the character?
Yeah, and I think that vibe wasn't obviously not meant to alienate anyone. It was just really
Right,
to say this is a fresh start. So
right.
you don't need to have a doctorate in Dick Tracy to understand what happens in this issue. So I think the challenge whenever you have to polish off like a character, and I don't want to say it's a reboot because it all fits together. Like what we wanted to do was definitely show you a Dick Tracy that was not established, not the Dick Tracy you see in the movie, not the Dick Tracy you read in the comic strip, because those things are happening or have happened. We wanted to show you kind of like year 1.5, like, not ground zero, and like how did he first put on the yellow hat? Like, I don't think anyone really wants to see that. Like, you just assume that he's this guy that wears a yellow trench coat and yellow hat, and he's got this wristwatch radio that is, decades technologically advanced. We wanted to show like the defining moment, like where he went from just this cop who is pretty good at what he does, to the legend of Dick Tracy, and what kind of spurred that on. So really what we did is we did a deep dive into the history of the character and kind of pulled out the things that, the toys we want to play with. Like if we had one Dick Tracy story to tell, what would it involve and what would it look like? And for Michael and I, we're like big movie guys, him more than me, but we wanted it to look cinematic. We wanted it to feel like a great crime comic, and we wanted it to feel noir, but not gratuitous. Like it's obviously violent. It's a crime comic, but it's not, I don't think it's excessive. Um, and we wanted the characters to really shine through. Like we wanted to show the great villains that Dick Tracy has, like really showcase the things that we loved about the character, and synthesize it into a sort of origin story. Like this is a defining story. Like this is the moment where Dick Tracy became Dick Tracy. But then also like tell it in a modern way. Like we thought maybe for a split second, like, do we set this in the modern day? And that just felt like it just didn't ring true. Like when you think of Dick Tracy, you think of the historical crime story. You think of the movie, you think of the classic strips. And so that felt much more natural to us to tell a story of this man like post World War II, in that weird period before the 50s where the country's still kind of trying to figure out what it is. And I mean, you could say that about any era, I guess, but really showing his journey from a young guy who's trying to do what's right to the legend we know him to be. And then just having a blast with the villains. And also, for my money, I really love writing Tess Trueheart. And I know Michael loves writing her too. I think she's going to be the breakout character of the series, her and Flat Top probably.
Yeah. Oh, so good.
Did you read
Again,
the issue? You got the issue, right?
I got the issue
Okay, okay,
and
okay.
not spoiling anything because y'all need to read it.
I just
But
want to know if it got your seal of approval.
it it did because where you're taking the character of Tess, I'm like, yes,
Good.
this is what we need. And the villains that you introduce, some of the characters that you introduce right off the bat, so good. I remember I got the issue. I immediately emailed Frank over at Mad Cave, and I was like, Frank, like my store owner is a diehard Dick Tracy fan. Like, can I share this review copy with him? Like, because I want to respect the thing. I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
trust me, he's going to want to bump his poll numbers after reading this issue.
Oh, good.
And I sent it to him. I walked in the next day and he goes, we got to talk. We sat in the store and talked for like 45 minutes just about issue one of
Oh
Dick
man,
Tracy. And
that makes my day.
customers were coming in. They're like, what are we talking about? Like, you need to add Dick Tracy to your polls. So,
That's the hope. The hope is that, we can execute this in a way that makes the hardcore fans happy, like literally you, like people like you who love the character and it's his world, but also bring in people who just are into like, do you read Criminal? Do you read Stray Bullets? Do you like 100 Bullets? Do you like Scalp? Do you like crime comics? Like, what are the comics that pull you in? We're trying to kind of hit that balance, which is not easy. And I think I'm really proud of that first issue. I think everyone was clicking on all cylinders, and it just feels like we've got some nice wind at our back.
yeah. And so, where was it for you that drew you to the character of Dick Tracy? Like you said right off the bat, people asked you, like, if you could draw one, write for one character. What was it about Dick Tracy that you had this like affinity for?
I mean, it was a movie. The movie was the doorway for me, and it was, I think, what came out in 1990.
Mhm.
We were coming out of Batman '89, the Tim Burton Batman movie, which I was obsessed with. Like, just, it's hard to explain to comic fans today who are like used to this world where you get comic book movies and comic book TV shows and comic book video games at all times. Like, when we were kids, I'm assuming we're kind of close in age. When we were kids, these things were once a year, twice a year. You'd get an X-Men Nintendo game, you'd get Dick Tracy, maybe you'd get a Batman movie. And so you latch onto those things and they become, you obsess over them because you don't have like, we didn't have the internet and we didn't have like unlimited TV. I couldn't watch like X-Men 92, binge it, and
Right.
I'm not trying to be like old man shaking at a cloud. I'm just saying the opportunities were different. And so Dick Tracy came out at a really important time because I was primed for it. I was ready for like another comic book movie, but I had no idea who Dick Tracy was.
Mhm.
And those posters were iconic. Like the silhouette, the yellow hat, the red kind of wobbly letters, like, yeah,
Yep.
it's right there. They just drew me in, and I remember going to the theater and watching it, and then immediately my uncle bought me the novelization, the Max Allan Collins book, and I read that cover to cover, and then you get the sticker book, and I read that cover to cover, and then I got the toys. Like those toys are so like bringing me
Yep.
back, the ones behind you, and then I started watching the cartoons. Like you start like you just start pull. I remember checking out the cartoons from Blockbuster Video, like just watching them, wearing out the tape, and yeah, and then that brought me to the source material, and that's when you really got to the kind of the unfiltered Dick Tracy, and I was like, why is this not bigger? Because even then, I think we understood like Dick Tracy did well as a movie, but it didn't do like Batman numbers. It didn't
Right.
do like it was a hit, but then there was nothing else. It kind of fizzled and then there was nothing else. So I was always fascinated by why it didn't like become a bigger deal because the characters were all there. And I do honestly believe that his rogues gallery is so hard to top. Like it's just a great, prune face, flat top, mumbles, the blank, itchy shoulders, big boy, lips. You could 88 keys. You can keep going and going
Little
and going.
face.
Yeah, Little Face. Like there's so many great characters that I was Michael and I were talking about this. Like if this does well, we could keep going for a long time because we would never run out of characters to use. And it's a testament to Gould's imagination, but it's also a testament to the creators that took over after him on the comic strip. I'm a huge Just Satan fan. I know he's not working on it now, but and Max Allan Collins wrote it for a really long time. Just really talented people that continued to build on what he did. So yeah, that's kind of the short version of why I love the
Yeah.
character.
Well, and I think it so resonates with me. Like, you're talking about all these things that you had, and I'm just like, yep, I've got this, I've got that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I have all these,
Yeah, the show and tell, yeah.
I do, and I'm like, we could just literally at one point just say like, oh, I had this as a kid, and things like that. But it is interesting. Like you talked about it, I didn't get to see the Batman '89 movie in theaters because my mom was like, it's too intense. Like, no,
Too
you
dark,
can't.
yeah.
But so Dick Tracy was my first comic book superhero movie experience. I remember going to pizza place before and getting to just experience that. Now watching it as a kid, I go, I'm surprised my mom was okay with some of the stuff in Dick Tracy,
Yeah,
but not
yeah.
Batman.
I mean, that opening scene's pretty brutal.
Yeah. And Madonna is a little racy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's definitely, it doesn't feel PG a lot of times, but I was a Madonna fan too, so it was cool
Yep.
to see her in the movie. And I think people underestimate how great a director Warren Beatty is.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I think that's what drew me, as a kid. You like you said, we didn't have you found something you liked,
Hmm.
you watched it over and over again because you didn't have this endless source of, like you said, streaming. And
Right.
even if you had cable, you were lucky even still at that age, like, and stuff like that. So we found stuff we gravitated towards and we just consumed it over and over again.
It was like
And
the early days of the VCR or scheduling the
yeah,
VCR. Like we had a VCR for a while, but it was only around that time that you could program it to record something. Like otherwise you'd have to be there and press record and like make it happen. But yeah, I just really loved the world, and I love the kind of dark deco vibe of the film and of the comic strip, like very Batman the animated series. Like that was all happening at once, and that was really influential to me. And I remember I read The Godfather like around that time, which I probably shouldn't have, but it was really like, a lot of crime noir stuff percolating in my young brain. So
you've mentioned the Rogues Gallery couple times already. Do you have like a favorite, or like you can't even say that yet because you don't want to give away anything? Do you have a favorite Rogues?
I mean, it's not a surprise that Flat Top is like shows up pretty fast because I think both Michael and I have an affinity for him in the same vein as like he's kind of like our bullseye if you have to use a one for one. Like, I really love Prune Face. He's always weirded me out since I was a kid. We both really like Mumbles, and yeah, I think we have plans for the blank down the road as well.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, all the villains and rogues that you have in the movie, like they knocked out half Batman's rogues, or not Batman, Dick Tracy's Rogues Gallery in the first 5 minutes of the film, and they
Yeah,
made
yeah.
three of them are toys. They're like, yeah, you were in the movie for longer than.
Yeah, and that was, even then I was like, huh, well, I guess they're not going to have a sequel, or they're not going to show up in the sequel. But yeah, I mean, you have the Tramp, you have the Kid, you have so many of these other characters that took up so much real estate on the comic strip, but that are in the movie. I mean, the Kid's there as a supporting player, but you know what I mean? Like a lot of little cameos. So that's something that we mindfully didn't want to do. We didn't want to waste, not to criticize the movie, of course. Like you have the movie, you have your
Right.
shot, but we wanted to have all the appearances count. So Mumbles has a very key role in the first arc. Flat Top is a really big part of the first arc. And then obviously the big bad at the end of the first issue is a meaningful part of the first arc. And, you hear rumblings of Lips Manless. You have, Tess is key, but there's still so many characters to roll out. And we really want to be thoughtful about how we do it and make sure that it feels earned, like we're not just throwing cameos to throw them in. Obviously, for like little scenes, like little vignettes, we'll throw in an obscure character because I'd rather do that than just have it be a nameless like bad guy.
Right. Well, and it's such a, I mean, like some of my favorite stories that Dick Tracy like involve, like one of the main character rogues is Mole, all right, and then
Yeah,
other ones like Frost. Like
yeah.
nobody outside of
This room.
Tracy fandom knows anything I'm talking about. But like there's such obscure characters and things like that I gravitate towards. Like it's just a widespread of. So you mentioned one of the things that you didn't want to do, that you, Michael, said we don't want to do this in the process of just throwing in someone. Did you guys kind of have, like, with, since you have such a love for this property, did you have a kind of a do's and don'ts of what you wanted to see happen with the property?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it a lot, Michael and I and Chantel and Geraldo, and really our big thought was let's boil the character down to the essence of what we love. Like, what are the elements that have to carry over? Like, what are the elements that have to be there? Because if they're not there, it's not Dick Tracy. Obviously, if he's not wearing the yellow coat or the yellow fedora, it's not Dick Tracy. If he's not wearing the wristwatch, it's not Dick Tracy. He has to be a cop. It has to be in this time period. It has to feel, so once we started jotting that stuff down, like who are the characters that really would play a big part in his early days? And we started kind of going through that. And, we dug through his origin as Gould told it and tried to echo it in our own way. without spoiling anything, especially like tying into Tess's own backstory and things like that. So we made a list of the things we thought that had to be in there, and then we thought, how does this fit into the kind of story we want to tell? Which is like a really like it's almost like LA Confidential, not to like assume that it's as good as LA Confidential, the film or the book, but that same kind of vibe in terms of corruption, government corruption, you know, the gray areas of the good and the bad, and just telling a great crime story. Like that's what interests me and Michael most is telling a great crime comic, having the opportunity to do that, and getting to do it with these characters is really like the best part.
Yeah, and like you mentioned about Tessa's, origin story and stuff, and
Mhm.
you want to incorporate that. Like if you've read the early strips, you kind of understand her origin story, and if you've read like one of my favorites, Big City Blues up there,
Yeah.
that's also a retelling kind of the origin stories and stuff. So, but it's done in a different way that I think fits and serves the story that you all want to tell.
Oh, you mean the Kyle Baker story?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that was something I meant to mention. Like that comic is like so off the grid because it's out of print. It was produced time to the movie, but it's one of Kyle Baker's best work. Some of his best work. It's like visually stunning, a really cool story. It reminds me a lot of what was happening with the Shadow at DC in the 80s. Like, you have guys, you have Andy Helfer, you have Sienkiewicz, you have Chaykin, you have Baker, and you have all these great, amazing artists, like each riffing on the Shadow. And that really, you have the same feeling with Kyle Baker on Dick Tracy. I really do wish that it was back in print.
yeah, for sure. I remember when the announcement dropped. I was probably book 3 or 4 of the Pete Fernandez
Oh,
series, and I was really excited because I'm in the process of reading, a crime noir style book that you're writing, and then to see that you're able to take that into the comic world with one of my favorite franchises. So, where was it for you? Of how do you translate your writing as a crime novelist kind of into writing it for a comic? Does it change as a writer writing for a crime novel for a crime comic, or not really?
um, yeah. I mean, the synthesis of story doesn't change. Like, you want it to be a good mystery, you want it
Mm,
to be driven by character, and I'm just speaking for myself. Everyone does it differently, but if it does, for me, if it's just plot mechanics and you don't care about the character and the character doesn't evolve, then it's like an episode of CSI, which is fine. Like there's people like that. People like Law and Order and stuff like that, and I see there's a place for it. But the stuff that speaks to me is character driven, and it's about character evolution and a character overcoming problems to become their true self or become more than they were before. That's the thematic stuff, but comics and prose are so different. Like when I'm writing a novel, no one bothers me. I can do whatever I want. Like eventually I will be bothered by my editor or my agent or what have you, but it's a very solitary process and there's no structure or restriction to it. Like if I want to write a 100-page scene of Pete like going to the grocery store, I could. Is that a good idea? Probably not, but I can do it. But with a comic, you've got containers you have to fill. Like you have 20 odd pages, and on a given page, you have maybe 5 to 7, maybe 8 or 9 panels at the most. And each of those panels, is a static shot of the action with X word balloons and so many letters that can fill the word balloon. So I don't want to kind of boil it down to feel like an algorithm, but there's just a certain that's almost soothing in its own way. Like I only have this much space and I can do this much and this much. So it's much more in tune with like outlining and pacing yourself. And most importantly, it's collaborative. And Michael and I are pros. We've been at this a long time and we've known each other a long time, that we're both pretty easy to work with. Like between us, there's no real ego. Like if he doesn't like something that I added, we can change it and vice versa. And we kind of trade off, we split the issues. Like sometimes I'll do the opening half and sometimes he'll do the back half, and then we'll flip and then we'll trade and kind of rewrite and revise each other. And by the end of it, I don't remember if I wrote the scene or not, which is what you want. Like it's so organic that you're not sure which part you touched, which is cool.
Yeah. I want to wrap up Dick Tracy talk just a little bit because
Yeah,
I know you're a busy person, and I could literally talk to you all night about Dick Tracy. But
yeah.
what's your vision? I know you said like as if it is received well, you hopefully have more stories to tell. Is there an initial arc for this of how many issues, or is this?
It's an ongoing. Yeah, I mean, Matt
Okay.
Cave's doing it as an ongoing, so that is really exciting to me. because that means we have some runway. We have the opening arc, which will be 5 issues, and hopefully we can do some kind of spin-off content like focusing on the villains. But we're still early days with that. But there's just like I said, there's such a great rogues gallery that we would be remiss if it had to show up in the main series. Like if we could do other like kind of spin-off stuff, that would be fun too. But so far, Michael, Geraldo, and I, and Chantel, and the rest of the team, we're focused on the main series, and we're focused on making it each issue like an event and feel really like it's humming. So yeah, we're definitely planning 2 or 3 arcs ahead. It's all about whether the market can
Right.
sustain it.
Right. Well, I don't know how market and stuff works, but I guarantee you there's a
Nobody
market in
does.
Columbus, Ohio that is going to keep this afloat for as long as it can.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
So, you we've talked a lot about Dick Tracy. You have a lot of other stuff. We talked about your novels. The first thing that I got connected with you was Secret Identity.
Thank you.
A crime, noir, also set in the world of comic books, which is great. And you've got some news with that coming out. I saw recently on your newsletter and stuff. So talk about that.
Yeah, so Alter Ego, which is the follow-up to Secret Identity, and I like to call it the other side of the coin. It's going to be set in the modern day, and it features this woman, Annie Bustamante, who is a Cuban-American former comic book artist. She worked in comics, she left the industry, and she moved into film, and she had a fairly successful film career, nominated for an Oscar, like is on her own path. But she has this one character that was so evocative and important to her that really motivated her to get into comics. And it was this really obscure character that came out in the 70s, is out of print, and it's called The Legendary Lynx. And so she loves it. Every time she sees the issue, it's like her totem. She has to buy it if she sees the issue at a comic shop. And then there's this announcement on social media that this company, Triumph Entertainment, is going to reboot the Triumph Comics library, starting with this character, the Lynx. And they reach out to Annie to come back to comics and write and draw the new Lynx. And she can't say no because this is the character that's meant so much to her. She's dealing with some fallout from her film career kind of imploding. But as she starts working on this comic book, she realizes that there's this dark story to the Lynx and the Lynx's creation that nobody knows about. And it's a mystery. It's a murder mystery. There's obviously a body count, and it's a crime novel, but it's really about like working on these characters we love and these ideas that we love, and what happens when the companies that own the characters maybe don't have that same investment that we have creatively in these characters. And you see it a lot in the fan community, like, oh, such and such a character wouldn't do that, or this doesn't make sense. But at the end of the day, if it happens, it happens, So it's really that kind of push-pull of art versus commerce. She has this idea of what she wants it to be, and she is passionate about it. But she also sees that there's this like really sordid backstory involved in the character. I joked with my editor. I was like, well, if you wanted a crime novel about parenthood and generational trauma, then here it is. But Sandy Jarrell also has like comic book sequences in this one as well, drawn in the style of Annie Bustamante as opposed to Doug Detmer, who was the artist in the first one. So that's been a lot of fun. And we're also going to release a collection of the Lynx comics, like the long lost Legendary Lynx comics, as a graphic novel around the time of Alter Ego's release.
That's fantastic. Do you have a release date for Alter Ego?
December 3rd.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's still a ways away, but you can pre-order it now.
So good. It's so funny that you're talking about this. And I'm like, this sounds very similar to like the real life story of you all writing Dick Tracy.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. It's interesting.
You love, and
yeah. Hopefully it's not as dark a story for us.
So, what else are some of the things that you're working on? Because I know you're a super busy creator.
Yeah. The next. I've been doing a lot of stuff for the Spider-Man office at Marvel. I did a short story in Edge of Spider-Verse #1, and then another, not short, like a story in Edge of Spider-Verse, and then another one in Web of Spider-Man, both drawn by Salvador Larroca. And we have another story in Edge of Spider-Verse 4, and they all tie together and spotlight Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, and Anya Corazon, Araña. And readers will remember that I wrote a novel featuring both of them for Disney Books, which was a blast. So it's all leading to something big that I can't really say yet. But
Okay.
if you read the solicit copy, there's something called the Spider Society that's coming together. Miguel is trying to put together a team to stave off this major threat, and it's really been a great time to just tee up a lot of those pieces and see how they play out. So I'm excited to be able to say more.
Yeah, that'll be good. And then I also saw just recently, around your birthday announcement, you had a new announcement of, I don't even know, are we allowed to talk about it?
Yeah, we are. Yeah, I'm writing a Bruno middle grade novel for Disney Books, which is called Nightmares and Sueños, and it's a prequel to Encanto, the much beloved Disney movie, and it's really kind of it's revealing a lot of the setup you see in the movie, like what happened to Bruno. Why can't we talk about Bruno? We actually are talking about Bruno in this book, so
We are.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny when that was announced, like everyone that was the joke, the default joke, which is fine. I mean, I'm ready for
I,
it.
and of course, I made that joke comment, and so I'm like, I'm so clever. I'm like, no, I'm an idiot. Everyone thought this.
It's low hanging fruit. It's
It is.
all good. I'm glad people are interested. I've never seen a response to a book like that. Like everyone was, it was pretty wild.
So how is it for you of, crafting something like a character like Bruno, where you have like already, in IP stuff, and compared to your original IP that like with a novel or something, like how do you get into a mindset as a creator to switch gears on that? Do you have to switch gears or is it a different
I do.
process?
It's a different kind of mentality. Like with my stuff, it's mine. I'm playing with
Right.
my toys, and I've built them, and I can destroy them, and I can do whatever I want with them. Whereas with writing work for hire stuff, whether it's for Disney or Marvel or DC or anyone, or Star Wars, it's a stewardship. Like you leave it in as good or maybe better condition than you found it, and hopefully that people will enjoy your addition to the mythos, and maybe they won't, and then there's still going to be other opportunities to read other Spider-Man or Star Wars stories in the future, but you want to do no harm. Like what's the surgeon's like oath? Like do no harm to these characters, but be additive. Like add new things, add to the mythos, make for interesting stories or twists, or use continuity to make for new stories. That's the kick I get out of it. I read Spider-Man as a kid. I watched Star Wars as a kid, and all this stuff was stuff that was really important to me growing up. So to be able to add to it is a thrill.
Yeah. That's so cool. I hesitate to ask, do you have anything else coming up that
Do
you
I
can
have
talk
anything
about?
else? I think that's a lot.
Yeah, that's why I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm hesitant to
Oh
ask.
yeah, I do have one more thing. I do this strip for King Features with this artist Nicolaj Villager called Mata Yave, Keeper of Time, and it's like our love letter to the pulp comic strips of years ago, like Flash Gordon or Prince Valiant's not really pulp, but like old school comic strips that are very lushly illustrated, and it's a sci-fi time travel romp, and we've been posting one a month. We're going to start posting more frequently come the summertime, and I think people will like it if you love like the work of like people like Alex Toth. Nicolaj is just an amazing artist, and he colors and letters it. I'm obviously contributing, but he's doing like the major lifting, and it really like it shows.
Yeah. Well, Alex, where can people follow along with you to stay up to date with everything that you got going on?
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think the best bet is to sign up for my newsletter, which you can do at my website. And my website, alexsegura.com, is your best bet to just stay up to date with news. I'm not on Twitter anymore. I am on Instagram at Alex Segura Jr. I'm also on BlueSky and Threads, but I'm not like super engaged in those. Like I'll post news and stuff
Yeah.
and reply to comments every couple days, but I'm not like there. I'm not part of the discourse for whatever, what. And I have a Facebook author page, so you can contact me there as well.
Cool. Very cool. Well, Alex, I this has been a blast getting to
Yeah.
just travel down childhood nostalgia with you.
Yeah, man. It's always a pleasure.
I would be remiss though if I didn't ask. Do you have a favorite memorabilia from the movie that you had as a kid that was your?
Yeah, I still have that novelization.
Yeah.
I still have my copy of the Kyle Baker stuff, and I still have a friend of mine. It's not the original one I had, but a friend of mine sent me a Dick Tracy and a Mumbles action figure because whenever he sees a Dick Tracy thing, he sends it to me like just he'll find something at like a used bookstore or what have you, and so yeah, I have a lot of that stuff.
That's so cool. So,
Thanks again, man.
man, I'm excited. I'm excited for it, gang. I think FOC by the time this drops has already passed. call your comic shop, make sure you're
Yeah.
getting it on your pull list. I'm telling you what, if you're a Dick Tracy fan, this is a given. But if you're not a Dick Tracy fan, you got to check it out. It's so good.
Thank
It's
you, man.
it's y'all did justice to the character, and I think it's going to open doors and avenues for people that are going to get exposed to just a great character that I feel has been underutilized in comics for a long time.
Thanks so much. Yeah, I hope people enjoy it. And thanks again for having me.
Yeah. So with that being said, make sure all the links we talk about are in the description of this video. If you're listening on podcasts, Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts, click the link in the description there. But as always, hopefully you can find some time to curl up, grab a book, and nerd out. Peace.